Michael, let me also thank you for your service. You asked the question, what mindset would I bring to the United States Congress? It is simple. I think that most congresspersons hopefully have the same, and commanders-in-chief have the same mindset, which is that we must take every action available to us, leave every opportunity on the table, do everything possible in order to achieve peace in the world and in the Middle East before resorting to any act of war. So, and I think you're seeing that play out right now. It's sometimes painful to watch and sometimes very slow to watch. And I want to address some of the sanctions issues that you talked about. My father's in the audience. He's a United States Army veteran, and his grandson, my godson, is on his way to Afghanistan within the next couple of weeks. And so, we in my family, Michael, and many families throughout Bucks County, both value your service, but also quite concerned. I was a co-sponsor of a pretty significant bill in the United States House of Representatives. It has to do with Iran sanctions and Syria human rights that would increase the number and types of sanctions that the president would have available to enforce against Iran to make sure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. And that is a goal. That is a required. Unfortunately, the current administration has not, in my humble view, enacted and enforced those sanctions to the extent that we should have, while at the same time permitting a little bit of light to appear between the United States of America and Israel, which is our most significant and closest ally in the Middle East, somebody that we have to have their back and they have to have ours. I was asked that question yesterday at a senior center in Central Bucks County. How much light should there be between the United States and Israel on these questions? My answer was zero. So we need to, as leaders and as world humanitarians, we need to make sure that we stay loyal to our friends, especially in the Middle East, that we enforce the sanctions that are currently authorized by the United States Congress, that we have tougher sanctions if required, but that we do everything possible before we commit troops to any additional conflict in the Middle East or anywhere else.
Thank you so much for your service. Really appreciate it. Look, I think the single biggest motivating factor in all these assessments has to be we need to keep Americans safe. And we need to keep Americans safe here from terrorism. We need to keep Americans safe abroad. And this is a very delicate analysis. It's very country by country specific. And you look at Iran, and absolutely, we need to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, period. Sorry, that was really a very strong period. And this is a critical factor for Israel, for us, and for the entire international community. When it comes to Syria and Libya, look, these are places that we've got real problems right now. We need to be monitoring the situation closely, and we need to be monitoring Iran closely. And absolutely, I would support sanctions, making sure we have strict sanctions that are enforced, to do everything we can to do what's happening right now in Iran. For example, like their currency, we see it being destroyed. We see the economic war has in fact started to have some very good effects. But having said that, I agree that we cannot take any option off the table when it comes to national security. And I want to shift into one other thing, which is veterans. I think we are not doing enough for our veterans. And we send you, and you step forward and go to these countries, put yourself on the line for our country, and then you come home. And I'll tell you, I think it's a national travesty that we have 68,000 homeless veterans on the street. I think it's a national tragedy that the unemployment rate is higher among veterans than it is in the rest of the population. And I think it's a national travesty that we are veterans who are committing suicide at a much higher rate than the rest of the population. We need to do more. If we're not taking care of those who put themselves forward for our country, then who are we taking care of? So thank you.
We can only take care of our national security and our friends abroad and take care of our veterans if we're strong financially at home. It goes back to all those important issues that I talked about getting our country's fiscal house in order. But since we segued to support for veterans, I want to say three things. Number one, I've worked very hard with colleagues and nonprofits throughout Bucks County to make sure that this issue of homelessness, especially homelessness among veterans is addressed. You may have seen in the paper, it was yesterday or the day before, that the district attorney has rolled out a special veterans court for veterans who come home. We spend a lot of money training you to go to war, but not enough reinculcating you to society as you come back. My office was intricately involved in the creation of the Veterans Court, and I'm proud of what the district attorney has done and what my staff have done. And finally, I would ask you to take a look at a bill that I co-sponsored called the Fairness to Veterans Act. Unemployment generally is too high, double digits, as I said. Unemployment among returning veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan is twice the national average, probably 18% or 20%. The Fairness to Veterans Act would help address that, and I have Democrats and Republicans supporting my effort in the United States Capitol to give fairness to veterans as they reemploy, as they come back. So again, thank you.
I'll just say, I wish, Congressman, that you hadn't voted against housing assistance to veterans. I wish that you hadn't voted against employment assistance to veterans. And I wish that you hadn't voted against health care and disability support to veterans.
I did not.
That's morally wrong.
Let's give each candidate 30 seconds more. Congressman.
Well, I'm not sure. I will cede my time to the candidate. She can explain in detail the votes that she's talking about, because I did not vote against funding for veterans. So I'll give my 30 seconds to candidate Bookfarm. Perhaps she can explain it. Bill number and vote, please.
The riot budget itself makes severe cuts across the board, but there have been countless budget votes that you've taken that have done just that.
No specifics. They don't exist.
Okay, we're going to move on. There are always instances in post-debate analysis when the people in the audience or watching on the various media say someone should have asked this question or that question, or addressed a particular topic. In an effort to avoid that criticism, I'm going to invite each candidate to ask each other one question and allot 2 minutes for an answer and a 30-second rebuttal. And to give you an opportunity to gather your thoughts for that, I'm going to first make some thank yous to the people that made this day possible, and then we'll come back to you, and when we do, Mrs. Bookfar, you'll be first. I'd like to thank Mr. James Sell, the Executive Director of the Lower Bucks campus, for the role he played in every aspect of this program. As you look around, you see the technology. It was obviously a very difficult endeavor, and Sell, for everything you do, thank you very much. Professor John Deal at the Upper Bucks campus, for coordinating the event there and for the students and members of the public watching. Thank you. Professor Samantha Gross for coordinating the event in Newtown. Thanks to our technical staff, especially Carl Carter, Director of Mindspace, for making the broadcast to the other campuses possible. To the Pennsylvania Cable Network, PCN. To PhillyBurbs.com. To Dennis McCauley for coordinating security. To the students, faculty, and administrators who assisted with the formulation of the questions, and to you, the audience, for your interest and demeanor today. Candidates enter every debate concerned about how things are going to go in the audience, and you've been exemplary, and we thank you for that. And I hope that's given the candidates enough time to gather their thoughts. So we'd like to have a little bit of back and forth with this, and before we have our closing statement. So we're going to start with Mrs. Bookfar. She's going to ask the question. Congressman will have 2 minutes to answer. Mrs. Bookfar will have 1 minute to respond, and then we'll reverse it. Mrs. Bookfar.